Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming here today. My name is Thomas Hicks, and I'm chairman of the United States Election Assistance Commission. The Commission is honored to host our 2018 EAC Election Readiness Summit here in the Congressional Visitor Center. Earlier this year, the EAC held an all-day summit at the National Press Club to highlight the spectrum of issues states and local officials and voters would face as they prepared for the 2018 federal election. Now that those elections are a little over a month away, today's event is a little of a bookend to the earlier summit, giving us a chance to revisit some of those same topics and examine where things are now, including how states are using the $380 million appropriated earlier this year and the steps states are taking to improve the security, accessibility, and efficiency of the upcoming elections. Since the 2016 election, much of the public discourse has focused around security, and for a good reason. And while this very public attention to this issue of election security is fairly new, the work to secure elections is not new to election officials, the EAC, or the tens of thousands of election administrators, staff, and election workers who support that work. It's fair to say that 2016 changed the threat environment we face, pitting state and local election officials against nation-state actors who scanned for vulnerabilities and were successful in accessing one state's voter rolls. These same actors made additional attempts to infiltrate states' election systems ahead of the 2018 midterms, and by all accounts, they will be back for 2020. Election officials must continue to prove themselves by managing these threats in the lead up to the 2018 election midterms, increasing security and resiliency of their systems and forming national and regional partnerships to improve information sharing and cyber protections. The EAC is proudly serving a lead role in creation of these federal partnerships, and we established the Government Coordinating Council charged with administering successful implementation of the federal government's designation of elections as the nation's critical infrastructure. Today, we'll be exploring a bit of how election officials are working to balance the demands of ensuring election security with the hundreds of facets of their jobs that don't make the headlines, including voter registration, poll worker recruitment, poll worker training management, post-election audits, using election data to improve the voter's experience, and so much more. As a reminder, this Friday was the original deadline for the EAC's Clearinghouse Awards. But since we're getting so much great feedback, we're going to extend that out to the end of November. This year's awards are being named after Brian Lewis, a longtime Senate staffer for Senate McConnell, and Wendy Noren, a local election official from Boone County, Missouri. Today's event will take a closer look at the intense year of preparing for the elections around the country, who have worked tirelessly to improve the security and resiliency of their systems. These officials understand the upcoming midterms would not only be a major test for their systems, but also for voter confidence. And they, like the EAC, are committed to ensuring the process is accurate, accessible, and fair to all. Before we dive in, I have a few housekeeping things to share. And I know that most of you all heard this stuff before, but we're going to do it again. First, if you're a social media user, unlike myself, we encourage you to post today's summit using the hashtag #Countdown18. The EAC has used this year to promote helpful materials for voters and election officials to prepare for the upcoming midterm elections. And most importantly, second, there will be opportunities throughout the day for audience members to ask questions of our panelists. When doing so, we ask three things. One, speak into the microphone so everyone can hear you. Two, give your name and affiliation. And three, and most importantly, actually ask a question. Next, if you have a cell phone or other electronic device, please place your phone on silence. And as many of you already know, we're going to have a vendor event at 2:20, and I've asked the president to give you an announcement at 2:20 to tell you to come back. And if you've read the paper, you know that's a joke, but apparently you folks don't read the paper in the mornings. So, and if you need anything throughout the day, ask one of our staffers. Brenda, raise your hand in the back there. David, who's at the table, and Natalie, who's probably at the, oh, she's right up front here. If you have any questions or need anything, talk to one of those three staffers. And they'll be happy to help you in any way they can. Now, let's turn to our first panel. Our first panel takes a closer look at how states and local election leaders are investing in enhancing security, including how they will use their portions of the $380 million in HAVA security funds appropriated by Congress earlier this year. While each of today's panelists has a unique story to tell, all of them are working day and night towards the same goal, ensuring that voters have confidence that the elections are secure and accurate. We look forward to highlighting their efforts during the coming hour. Joining me for the discussion today is Alabama Secretary of State John Merrill, who was first elected to public office as a representative of the House District 62 in 2010, and then elected as Secretary of State in 2014. Since he took office, Alabama has more than 1 million newly registered voters, setting a new state record for registered voters participating in elections. Secretary Merrill is also a National Association of Secretaries of State member of, and member of the Republican Association of Secretaries of State. He's co-chair of NASA's Voter Participation Committee and serves as NASA representative on the Steering Committee for National Voter Registration Day. He's also a member of the EAC Standards Board, and I want to thank you for joining us here today. Meagan Wolfe is the administrator of Wisconsin's Election Commission. She joined the state's service as voter service election specialist in 2011. Initially, she developed and implemented voter outreach, communication, and resources, both on a public information scale and assisting individual voters. Later, she led the multi-year effort to relaunch My Vote Wisconsin so that it's easier for voters to use and easier for clerks to assist those voters. In April of 2017, she became Assistant Administrator, managing WisVote, staff and IT team, and the Commission's elections security planning. In March of this year, Meagan was appointed Interim Administrator of Wisconsin's Elections Commission and also serves on the EAC Standard Board. Thank you for coming here today, Meagan. Secretary of State Kim Wyman. First elected in 2012 and is currently serving in her second term. Prior to her current role, the Secretary served as the Thurston County Elections Director for nearly a decade and was elected the County Auditor from 2001 to 2013. Secretary Wyman's responsibilities include overseeing elections, corporations, charity filings, the Washington State Library, the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, Washington State Archives, and a number of special programs, including the Combined Fund Drive for charitable giving for public employees and addressing confidential programs to protect survivors of domestic violence, and Stalking and Legacy, Washington's An Oral History, an exhibit program that tells the state's most intriguing stories. Secretary Wyman is a graduate of California State Long Beach and holds a master's degree in public administration from Troy State University. She was awarded an honorary doctorate in leadership from City University in Seattle in 2015. The Secretary is also a certified elections and registrar administrator, CERTA, from the Election Center in Auburn University, and Washington State Certified Election Administrator. We welcome you as well, Secretary. Last but not least is Joe Rozell, is the Election Director for Oakland County, Michigan. He received his master's degree in public administration from Oakland University and is a certified elections registration administrator certification from Auburn University. He's a member of the Election Center and the Michigan Association of County Clerks. Rozelle is an adjunct faculty member of Oakland University, teaching in the Department of Political Science. He also serves as an elected nonpartisan city commissioner in Huntington Woods, Michigan. Welcome, Joe, and I look forward to our discussion. My first question to each of you, we can all agree that in a different we are in a different place than we were in 2016. Please tell us what steps your state has taken to improve elections this November and what future investments you plan on making to make. So, Secretary, you want to start that off?
Well, Commissioner, I am honored to be here and to be a part of this panel this morning to answer some questions that may be generated from the audience, as well as to share with you some of the things that we're doing in the great state of Alabama regarding ensuring integrity and credibility in the elections process. We all know that unless we continue to validate, inform, and make sure that we make comfortable our people about the things that we're facing, especially in the area of cybersecurity, we will lose credibility in their eyes and it will deter participation. Anytime people lose confidence in the process, it's a negative for all of us because the validation of the result will not be received as well as it would be otherwise. So we think that it's very important to make sure that we're maintaining that fight each and every day. The other thing I think we have to recognize is that this is not something that is just going to be here for a short period of time and then move on. You know, one of the things we were talking about at our conference in Philadelphia earlier this year was that 2 years ago we didn't have any breakout sessions at all on cybersecurity, and now today roughly 75% of the things that we talked about at our conference in Philadelphia were related to cybersecurity and elections. And it's so important to know that we have to remain diligent in that regard. Now, we were doubly excited when we were able to receive that new allocation from the government related to the HAVA funds that were recently released. Our contribution was a little bit over $300,000, but the $6.1 million that we received is very important to our state. Many of you may know that our state is not a state that is rich when it comes to resources that are available for discretionary purposes or specifically in this particular area. So anything that we can receive that can help us benefits not only this area, but all 4.8 million people in our state. One of the frustrations that I experienced when I became the Secretary of State in Alabama 3 years, 9 months, and 14 days ago was that we had the original HAVA allocation that was set aside, and it was divided in our 67 counties by the number of voters that were in each individual area. So one of the things we wanted to make sure that we did was to evaluate where those resources needed to be invested for the greater good of our entire state. The reason is because we still have some of our 67 counties who have received those resources from 15, 20 years ago that are still in their general fund bank accounts in their local counties. They still have yet to be invested in the elections process, which is not a benefit to anybody. It makes a bank account look good, but it's not a benefit to anyone. And so we think it's important to know that the resources that are invested to benefit everybody in our state. So the 4 areas that we thought were appropriate for this investment at this particular time for us had to do with voting equipment, replacement and upgrades, election auditing, voting registration systems and management, and addressing cyber vulnerabilities in our state. In the area of voter equipment replacement and upgrades, we are currently upgrading all the computer equipment in each one of our 67 counties for 5 different officials. There are 3 border registrars that are directly responsible for voter registration in each one of those counties. And Commissioner, I was delighted to hear you say about our efforts in voter registration in our state, which is not something we've been known for in the past, especially under Republican administrations. But I am delighted to tell you that we have registered 1,085,898 new voters since I've been Secretary of State, and only 2 words will address that, and that's roll tide. The other thing that you need to know is that we have 3,429,071 registered voters in Alabama today. Those numbers are unparalleled and unprecedented in the history of the state. But those voter registrars, the 3 that are there, as well as our chief elections official, the probate judge, and our circuit clerk, who is the absentee election manager, will each receive new computers over the next 2 years. We started that process on Monday. It will be completed no later than September 30, 2019. Hopefully it'll happen before that time, but we want to make sure that all of those individuals have upgraded equipment that we provide from the state level. Also, I think it's important for you to know that we're currently working on a plan for a more secure election night reporting system where they actually use dedicated equipment when they're reporting that information to us. We had not had a real-time election night reporting effort in our state, in the history of our state. And it's not compulsory now, but everybody participates, and we're really excited about that. In the area of post-election audits, we continue to evaluate what's right and best for our state. We have paper ballots. We retain those for a period of at least 2 years. We'll continue to do that. Our voter registration systems and management, we want to have continued upgrades and maintenance as is required. We recently, back in May of this year, implemented a two-factor authentication system for all accounts and everyone that's got access to our voter registration system. We also ensure that our election systems vendors has the necessary security in place to prevent security breaches as we know them today. In the area of cyber vulnerabilities, I think it's important to know that we have continued to conduct cyber hygiene scans of our system, working with our public and private partners whenever necessary to ensure that those audits that are conducted and the assessments that are made are performed routinely so as to ensure the integrity and the credibility of the process. And we are currently working with as many public and private partners as we can possibly identify. I would share this before I conclude this part of my remarks, is that because of the very interesting United States Senate special election that we had in December of 2017, there were a number of things that were introduced in our state that other states had not seen at that particular time related to social media intervention in promoting certain candidates, in promoting certain issues or policy positions for certain groups. And we have had the opportunity to interact with officials from Twitter, officials from Facebook, officials from Google in person to help them understand why it's important to make sure that they are also maintaining the type effort that's important to ensure that the credibility and the integrity, the entire process when it comes to electioneering on those social media platforms is something that is being checked, it's being vetted, and that it's properly updated. And a number of the changes that have occurred in Facebook in placing political advertisements occurred because of our special U.S. Senate election in December of 2017. So we're very proud of that. We have been excited to work with them as cooperating partners, and I look forward to entertaining some questions that you might have later on in this session. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to have this opportunity to share information and learn from our other election partners across the country. So in the state of Wisconsin, we're taking a two-phase approach to ensuring election security for 2018 and beyond. The first phase focuses on using the security funds to implement improvements before the November election. Some of the measures that we have taken to improve election security for November include expanding our post-election audit process and training for our local election officials. So in Wisconsin, we have required post-election audits of randomly selected voting equipment after every general election since 2006. For the 2018 partisan primary, we piloted an additional type of post-election audit that was aimed at verifying ballot totals in addition to those voting equipment accuracy audits that we were already conducting. At its most recent meeting, the State of Wisconsin Elections Commission moved to increase the number of voting equipment audits for the November 2018 election and to offer reimbursement to our local election officials that opt in to conducting additional vote total verification audits. Another very immediate need that we identified as part of our first phase was training for our local election officials. When cybersecurity first became part of the elections conversation, we would attend local clerk events around the state and talk to them about cybersecurity. This approach caused their eyes to glaze over in about 15 seconds. They could not see how this new arena of election security applied to them. They were also unclear what the expectations were and felt like they were being asked to become cyber experts. So we quickly realized that we needed a new approach to training. In Wisconsin, we also have a very unique relationship with our cities, towns, and villages. In most other states, elections are administered at the county level, meaning there's an average of 50 to maybe 100 local election officials. In Wisconsin, each municipality has a clerk that administers elections, meaning there are 1,853 local election officials. The Wisconsin Elections Commission is one of the only agencies in our state with direct contact and shared responsibility with each of these municipalities, and we're certainly the only ones that are talking to them about cybersecurity. So we saw a gap that needed to be bridged, and we stepped in to fill that with 2 types of training on elections and cybersecurity. Reaching our 1,853 clerks at a set time can be a challenge. 2/3 of our municipal clerks are part-time, and 1/3 of them turn over every year. We wanted to meet our local election officials where they were, and so we developed an online learning center. The Learning Center has hundreds of interactive online video tutorials on a variety of topics, and the Online Learning Center allows our clerks to access the training on their schedule, be it after hours or on weekends. The Learning Center now also includes training on cybersecurity. Not just cybersecurity as it relates to elections, but cybersecurity awareness training on topics like avoiding phishing scams, password security, and browsing safely. This year, we launched 6 interactive training modules for our clerks. The training was launched as part of our new policy for our statewide voter registration system. Users of our statewide voter registration system must now complete those 6 training modules and sign a new policy before they're even given credentials to access our system. We also developed a tabletop exercise training program for our local election officials. So Wisconsin state staff attended the Belfer Center Defending Digital Democracy event earlier this year to learn from our federal partners how to run a scenario-based election security tabletop training. The staff at the the Wisconsin Elections Commission then simplified and packaged that exercise for our local officials. We then trained our county clerk partners to serve as regional trainers, and we're very grateful that they were able to serve in that role so that we could have representation around the state. We also quickly realized when we started to enter into this realm of security training that we could not, at the state, individually train 1,853 people, so we really needed their assistance. These trainings are now happening around the state to prepare clerks for the role in any potential security event that may occur. The second phase of the Wisconsin Election Security Plan involves collecting feedback from our local election partners and the public. With the new HAVA security funds, we wanted to be sure that we were addressing concerns not just at the state level, but at the local level too. We have started the process of collecting feedback from our local election officials on what they need to secure elections at the local level. We have also solicited feedback directly from the public about their concerns. We've asked them what it would take to make sure that they had confidence in the elections process. Our second phase also allows us to keep our approach to security dynamic. The plan we have in place to protect elections today is not the same plan that will be effective in the future. New information, threats, and resources come to our attention daily. We need to remain agile and resilient in our approach. There's no finish line, and our approach focuses on sustainable resources to address challenges as we head into 2018, 2020, and beyond.
All right, Commissioner, I do want to put in the official record that we went 2 minutes and 43 seconds before Secretary Merrill said roll tide. That was a record, I am certain.
I'm sorry it took me so long.
Exactly. Well, good morning. I'm Kim Wyman, and I serve as Secretary of State for the state of Washington. And our state has about 4.2 million registered voters, and we have 39 county auditors who are, and election officials who are elected and perform the actual duties. Wisconsin makes me feel so much better about that when I hear about those large numbers. So let me share a little bit about our plan and how we're implementing the HAVA 2 money, which for our state, I think like most of my colleagues, it came at the perfect time. We began a project back in 2014 to upgrade our voter registration system, which is a statewide system, overseen by the Secretary of State. The 39 county auditors do upload and do all of the work and activity to keep the system going and do the data entry on that voter registration system. But each county has their own election management system. And all of these systems were purchased back in the early mid-2000s when we went live with our system in 2006. And like so many states, those systems now are old. And so in 2014, we began a process of trying to build a new system. And my claim to fame as an election official is I got 40 independently elected officials to agree on something. We began a process to identify what we wanted a new system to look like. And this has been a very collaborative effort. We worked for about a year and a half, 2 years to just define the business needs, put it out to the vendors, and had a bidding process last year or earlier this year. And we are currently bringing that system up now. And what it will entail, we call it WA Vote. Vote WA, it's new. Whatever. It's a new computer system. And as we were gearing up for having it go live in 2019, of course, the money was appropriated by Congress. And so for us, it's perfect timing because we're first trying to build our infrastructure up, the firewalls and things that we have in place. We're beefing up, and we're able to do it not only with our current system, gearing up for the 2018 general election, but also have it be parallel with an eye to our new system that we'll be installing next year. So that timing piece was really nice to do our infrastructure upgrades. When we started looking at the money, we made a strategic decision to focus, one, on the partnerships we've been creating since 2016 with federal partners and state partners, but also to build a cyber unit. I think this is kind of the linchpin for how we're going to use the money. The partnerships began in 2016 with, of course, Homeland Security, the MS and EI ISACs, to in our own state with our own IT professionals around the state, our state auditor, and also the National Guard. And what we've tried to do with all of these partnerships is really have kind of a strategic approach to this. First, doing the testing and assessment of our system, not only at the state, but looking at the county systems and really trying to be very comprehensive in how we approach that security and assessing how our systems are working together. So we're strengthening those. And what we realized very early on in bringing up our new system is that we have a different vulnerability than we had with our current system, in that we're more connected to the counties. So our system is only secure as the weakest link. That one election worker who works 6 months a year in a county in Eastern Washington and is part-time, we have to make sure they are as strong and as well-versed in cyber issues as the person who works in downtown Seattle in King County, who is working with this stuff every day. So what we realized is the counties just don't have the resources that they need to be able to do that. Our 39 counties vary from King County, where Seattle is, of over 1 million registered voters, down to counties that have a couple thousand. And those resources are very disproportionate. So we are going to create a cyber team, essentially, within our certification and training program, who are working directly with our national partners, but also working with the 39 counties to try to level that playing field. So they're not only going to be doing testing and training of those election officials, like my colleagues, and you've already heard, we've done some tabletop exercises with them at our annual conference. We've done trainings and just security awareness across the board to help them kind of take their game up just as we are. But we're also going to be able to provide IT support to those 39 counties. Again, some counties like King County or Pierce County, who have very robust staffs and big budgets, have their own IT teams. But those smaller counties don't. And so we're going to really try to leverage these dollars to have that higher level of IT support for them to be able to be aware of not only the cyber threats, but just make sure their systems are secure. I talked about we're already reinforcing our infrastructure. And then, of course, another big part of this whole program is going to be the protecting and monitoring of our systems. So in our state, like most others, we have our voter registration side and election management side. Those are things that do have interconnectivity to the internet. One of our security models is having our tabulation systems be standalone, not connected to the internet, and then also making sure we are doing the cyber security to make sure that flash drives aren't being put in that could be corrupted, or that there's no other way that those systems could be connected to the internet. So, okay, that's the basic outline.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm Joe Rozell, the election director from Oakland County, Michigan, the state's second most populous county with approximately 1 million registered voters. We definitely are in a different place than 2016. In 2017, counties in the state of Michigan began the process of acquiring new voting technology. And Michigan went from a precinct-based paper optical scan system and upgraded to a paper-based precinct digital scanning system. It was a $40 million investment statewide that was focused on improving security. We're also making investments in cyber, information, and physical security as well. With regard to cyber security, we are now in this statewide election security assessment that we're taking part in, as well as, for the first time, dedicated employees in both our state's Bureau of Elections. We have an election security specialist now. And then within the state's Department of Technology Management and Budget, we have a cyber election security specialist that are available at the state level as a resource for both the state and those of us at the local level. At the county level, we've also spent a lot of time training staff on recognizing cyber threats, as well as working with our staff and their social media accounts to remove any reference to them working in the elections department so that they aren't identified as a threat, or a target, I should say, by individuals, potential bad actors. With regard to information, we are doing this comprehensive election security training, as well as post-election audits. So Michigan, for several years now, has been involved in post-election audits. We're now expanding or enhancing those post-election audits to sort of enter the risk-limiting audit arena, and so we've begun that process, as well as a complete overhaul of our state's voter registration system. So that originally, we had an internally developed voter registration system from the mid-90s that has now been overhauled and upgraded, and that process is just completed. At the county level, I will say physical security, we've invested significant dollars in physical security. We recognize that providing individuals with access to, voting equipment or tabulation equipment is very problematic. So we've invested in alarms, intrusion detection systems. We've enhanced our video surveillance and monitoring systems of these facilities. Our tabulation hardware and software resides in a building that is guarded by sheriff's deputies 24 hours a day. So we've made investments in physical security to detect and prevent access to this equipment up to, during, and after the election. And so we appreciate Congress and the EAC's efforts with these cybersecurity grants. We're viewing it sort of hopefully as a down payment, if you will, because there's a lot of work that's still ahead of us. And as the Secretary from Alabama has mentioned, this is sort of the new normal, if you will. And so this is something that we will continue to be vigilant about into the future. Thank you.
Thank you all for those great comments and discussion. I have a few individual questions. Secretary Wyman, I want to start with you. Along with Colorado and Oregon, Washington is one of the 3 states that entirely vote by mail. Does this present any unique challenges or opportunities when it's facing for election security? And do do you have any advice, election focused, on any state that wants to do entire vote by mail?
Yeah, vote by mail. I forgot to mention that little detail. My state is a vote by mail state, and yes, I think you're going to see more and more states moving in that direction over time. I can tell you from my perspective, when I hear of states who do early voting, absentee voting, poll site voting, and also have a robust permanent absentee program, you're running 4 elections at once. And we went through a very close governor's race a few years ago. I think it was the closest governor's race in the country's history. It really showed us that when you're just trying to do 2 elections simultaneously, that you can't do everything as well as you'd like to. And I think you're going to see, as the cyber issues increase across the country, you're going to see more states really reevaluating the services they provide. Vote by mail is very convenient for voters. I realize the further east you move across the country, it becomes more and more foreign, and I know a lot of my colleagues look at me like, you do what? But I think that from a security standpoint, it helps us to be able to have more controls in place. When I think about our environment before we went to vote by mail, where we had thousands of polling places open on election day, we had literally thousands of people who, if we were lucky, we got to train 1 day a year. If we were lucky, they worked for us 6 days a year. And if we were lucky, I don't want to say that they were young enough to be able to deal with technology, but the average age of my poll workers when we moved to vote by mail was 70, and I'm not exaggerating. And I say that because all of those things are the challenges on election day, that my biggest points of failure as a county auditor were the people in the polling places, because we just didn't have the resources to train them and do the things that would help them be successful. And if you remember back in the 2000s when we moved to Help America Vote Act and all of the requirements that entailed, we added more and more things for those poll workers to do to get a ballot in a voter's hand to make sure they got the right one and voted it correctly. So now as you move, all these years later, and all of the other things we've added on to those requirements, it really is setting election officials up to fail because there's so much to do and so many plates to keep in the air on election day, or in the voting period for that matter. So I think vote by mail strength is that you have less people who are actually administering the elections. Typically they're more professional because they're working year round in that field alone, and we have more ability to control those access points that bad actors would have. So I think, but it's also a challenge because we don't have as much accessibility on election day that other states do.
Thank you. Director Rozelle, you recently completed a procurement process for purchasing new voting equipment. Can you tell us what that was like and some of the positive aspects of the new or additional considerations you used in making this decision?
Sure. Michigan replaced a voting system that had been in place since 2004. And I will tell you, it was a significant investment of both, human capital, human resources, as well as financial capital and financial resources. It was a 2-year process. I was part of a state committee that went through drafting functionality requirements and features that were desired, drafting an RFP, receiving and evaluating responses, performing certification testing, working with the EAC, and contract negotiations and implementation. So it was a significant undertaking. And I will tell you that when we got to the RFP response phase, we recognized that there was going to be a funding shortfall, that we did not have all of the funds available to cover the acquisition of this new voting system statewide. So we approached our state legislature for an appropriation. And I will tell you that initially our state legislature was very reluctant to appropriate approximately $10 million of funding to shore up the shortfall so that the 83 counties in Michigan could acquire this new voting system. The expense of acquiring these systems was always one of borne by the locals. The legislature was worried about establishing precedent if they appropriated this money. But we frame this in such a way that the importance of security and the importance of getting all 83 counties across the finish line at the same time, so that we didn't have a case of sort of the haves and the have-nots, where counties that could afford it would have a more secure, newer voting system, and counties that couldn't would sort of be left behind. And so working with our legislature, they recognized that argument and did appropriate the $10 million so that we were able to get all 83 counties across the finish line at the same time. Aside from the desire to improve the voter experience, I will say that a big factor in our decision to acquire a new voting system was the increased and improved security that exists now versus the system that we acquired back in 2004. I mean, some of these features, such as, we were moving away from an election management system that was really developed in the, say, mid-'90s, late '90s, to one that's a modern platform that was sort of built from the ground up, not code layered on top of code. So that was an important factor for us. The digital security keys with two-factor authentication, gone are the days of having a metal key that sort of controlled all of these different functions. It's now a digital key with a password protected two-factor authentication. We were able to use complex passwords and assign different roles to different employees based on their role in the organization, or our election workers out in the precincts. And the tabulation computers now have an embedded operating system and operate really in a kiosk mode, so that's all you can use these for. When you turn them on, they go directly into the program. You don't have the ability to install other software. They're not connected to the internet. So we were very excited to be able to replace our voting system because of these increases in security, these improvements in security. EAC certification was mandatory in our state. We also have a state-level certification that we took these vendors through, but we work cooperatively with the EAC because all vendors required some modifications to their system. All states are different, do things a little bit differently, and so we work cooperatively to get those systems certified at the EAC and then again at the state level. So it was, again, a very involved process, but one that I think was very important to do in advance of this upcoming election.
Great, thank you. Minister Wolfe, you mentioned something in your remarks about no finish line, and I believe that's the case with across the country, that we are going to be doing this in perpetuity, that, whatever threats we have today are not going to be the threats for tomorrow. And Wisconsin recently issued a notice of recruiting or possibly have hired someone to do election security. A lot of offices are thinking about this and thinking about moving forward with it. What was your experience like when you did this, and what sort of advice would you give other offices on hiring security professionals for this?
Sure. Well, thanks. So one of our first priorities with our phase 1 of our election security plan was to hire dedicated staff that would be dedicated to election security. And so we recently recruited for and actually onboarded staff in the roles of election security lead, IT project manager, data specialist, security trainer, and a voting equipment certification and post-election audit specialist. So while we're hiring these dedicated positions now, it does not mean that these important election security roles were not being filled previously. Our entire staff had been focused on election security over the course of the last few years. This new focus meant that their attention had to be diverted from their traditional tasks to focus on election security. And that also meant that things like updating our training, updating some of our forms, manuals, and even some IT tasks like creating efficiencies in our system, those had to be moved to the back burner so that our staff was able to focus on election security. With this new dedicated security staff, our other staff will be able to return their attention back to the mechanics of election administration, although the expectation will always remain that they will keep security at the forefront of what we do. Because existing staff had been filling many of those crucial roles already, we were very fortunate to find some internal candidates who had actually grown into the roles and developed skills that were very specific to election security. As the field of election security has grown, our staff has pursued professional development and fine-tuned a unique skill set that in a lot of ways were able to meet our needs in a way that would otherwise be very difficult to hire for. Internally hiring staff in these very specialized election security roles then allowed us to backfill positions that utilize a more broad skill set. And so I think that that was something that was surprising to me, but ended up being very helpful. We were also very successful in hiring new staff who had experience as local election officials. Having staff with experience at the local level and bringing that perspective has been absolutely invaluable to us, especially in roles such as training. So like I talked about, training has been a big initiative for us, and having people that are resonant with that audience and understand the challenges they face has been something that's been very, very effective for us as well. Based on our experience with hiring, I have a couple of takeaways. Recruiting and onboarding is a lot of work, and extra effort is needed to try to appeal to the most qualified candidates. And then when new folks come on board, there's a lot of time that's needed for that transition as you train them. This takes up a lot of time, but prioritize it. It's important. Our jobs as election administrators have grown significantly in the last few years, and there's no way to get everything done unless you push things to the back burner without bringing on additional talent. So even though it's a lot of work, I would recommend that you focus on that and prioritize it if that's something your office needs. Another takeaway was invest in your team. Invest in the people that you have. Give your team the resources that they need to be successful. Sometimes that may mean recognizing the skills that maybe you already have on board and offering them opportunities for enhancement. Elections administration and election security changes every day. So other times it also means allowing a team member to grow and evolve into a new role to meet a new need. Then backfilling that position that might be a little easier to recruit for with more traditional skill sets.
Thank you. Secretary Merrill, you were recently in the news talking about steps your state is taking to secure elections, and you talked a little bit about that today. Can you talk a little bit more about your efforts to register new voters and the Harbor narrative that you've done with this?
Absolutely, Commissioner, and I appreciate the question. I think that it's so very important to realize that because of where we are today, we have to continue to concentrate on training. When you look at the military, you look at law enforcement, look at our firefighters, they spend the majority of the time that they have each and every day in training, in preparation, in understanding for the event that may occur at some point in the future. And that's what we have to do, and that's what we're doing in Alabama. One of the things I was very disappointed in when I became the secretary, actually before I was even inaugurated, I went to a program in in California, and I met Secretary-elect Wayne Williams from Colorado, and we were just having a conversation, and one of the things he introduced to me was about the outstanding election training facility that was located at Auburn University in Alabama. And I asked him a few more questions, and the thing that was so disappointing to me was not that it was at Auburn, which is what most of y'all might think. The thing that was so disappointing to me was that I didn't know anything about it because it had never been introduced to me. And we hadn't talked about it in the legislature. We didn't talk about it with our election preparation. It was just not something that was introduced. I found out that very few of our people ever went to Auburn for the training. People were coming from all over the nation to take advantage of that training. And don't get me wrong now, because y'all know I love Alabama. We've already talked about that. And Auburn is an outstanding place to live and an outstanding institution of higher learning. It'd be one of the finest in the nation if they didn't have an athletic program. But what's important for you to know is that the quality of the work that they do there in preparing people for elections is unsurpassed in the nation. And so we started a program of training for our Board of Registrars, which are our local election voter registration officials, who are required to go and attend a program. We contracted with Auburn over a 3-year period to make sure that everybody received the training to do what they needed to do to be prepared, because you can never train enough. And when you think you've reached a point of saturation, that's when the event occurs, and that's when you're caught in a bad way. And so we don't ever want that to happen. Now, Thomas put one on the tee for me, and I'm very pleased with that when he talked about voter registration, simply because the commitment that I made when I became the secretary was to ensure that each and every eligible U.S. citizen that's a resident of Alabama is registered to vote and has a photo ID. I think that's so very important. We passed a voter ID law in our state in 2011, had it fully implemented, 2014. I've already talked to you. I gave you the numbers on people that we have registered, total number of registrants. And I think it's so important for you to know that our commitment in making sure that the ID requirement is being met, not only do we visit all 67 counties every year with our individual mobile units that go all over the state, and I do that too. As a matter of fact, as of today, I've been to 52 of our 67 counties since January the 1st for 395 unique visits to those 52 counties that I've been to. But we will actually go to people's homes to give them IDs if it's required. I mean, we introduced a mobile app, we introduced electronic registration. We want to make sure that everybody has the ability to participate at the level that they want to participate so they can be a part of the process. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there another school in Alabama that we haven't heard of?
Well, we have several institutions of higher learning, but if you want to talk about practice again, I think you can see what the results are when you look on the football field on Saturday. That's why it's important to be prepared, even if it's 2nd and 26.
We're going to open it up for questions from the audience. And again, we ask 3 things. Speak into the microphone. Natalie has the microphone, I believe. The microphone's up here. Speak into the microphone so people can hear you. Raise your hand so we can go to you. And give your name, affiliation, and most importantly, there you go, ask a question. All right? Eric Fisher.
Good morning. Eric Fisher with Congressional Research Service at the Library of Congress. I was wondering, there was some mention of risk limiting audits, and that's become a big thing among the security folks, and I was wondering whether you all have considered that, or had experience. What are you finding, and what are the benefits and disadvantages? How do you think it should be implemented?
Well, I think I may be the only one on this panel that's not already fully engaged in this effort, and I will tell you that again is one of the things that I was disappointed in, is that we did not have an effort already in place. Because I don't think if you choose not to accurately measure what's already occurring and validate it by checking it and doing spot checks or things that are necessary to figure out if things are actually the way they appear to be, then you're just setting yourself up for exposure at some point in the future, which is negative, and then you've got to respond to the questions about why this was not being done before. So you have to have a way to properly audit and to make sure that you're checking against the things that look as though they are standards already. And so that's what we've been doing, is evaluating what other states are currently doing to see what's going to be right and best for Alabama.
I think another important thing to mention as well is that there are different types of post-election audits. A risk-limiting audit is a very specific type of post-election audit. In the state of Wisconsin, because we have such a vast diversity of voting equipment and municipalities, risk-limiting audit is something that really requires everybody to be on the same type of voting equipment or to have more consistency as far as what that process looks like. There are other post-election audits, and the goal of that is really to ensure that the votes have been tabulated correctly, that the result is correct. We also have voting equipment audits after general elections, and that is with the purpose of making sure that the voting equipment is tabulating the votes correctly. So there's a lot of different types, and we've been exploring how those various types could be used in a system like ours.
So in Washington State, I mentioned I totally overlooked the obvious. One of the strengths of Vote by Mail, that was a perfect question to tee it up, is we're a paper ballot state. So we do have ballot marking devices, but we don't have touchscreen devices that don't have a paper ballot associated with them. In our state, we've always done pre and post-election audits, obviously logic and accuracy tests and those types of things on the front end. But we have a sample. It's not a risk-limiting audit yet. We do have legislation that was enacted this year that will bring the opportunity for counties to do that. But for similar reasons you've already heard, we're not doing them just yet. But we do actually audit a random office that's picked by the two political parties after the polls have closed, and after the voting period ends, and some things die hard. And then there is an audit there, and then we also have manual recounts that are triggered by less than 0.5% or less than 0.25%. So we already have those in place. We're working towards risk limiting audits. We're looking to Colorado's model and some of the things they've done there. But it's a challenge because we have different voting systems and not all of them lend themselves well to finding those ballots easily. So we're working through it.
I would agree that the logic and accuracy testing that takes place before and then the equipment is sealed, we know that everything is great going in, and I think it's an important process to include afterward to make sure that we can have confidence in the results. It takes time, it takes resources, but I think that it's necessary, these audits as part of the process. And they've not yielded anything in our state that has shown any significance with any of the voting equipment. All of the audits we've done have shown that the devices are recording votes correctly.
Any other questions? Wow, I'm surprised. Share, it's not, yeah, it's not here yet.
Good morning. Doug Chapin from the Forest Marsh Group and the University of Minnesota. I wanted to riff on something that Meagan said about hiring in Wisconsin. I'm curious if the panel thinks that the future of election cybersecurity personnel are going to be promoted from within? Are we going to be using people who know elections and teach them cybersecurity? Or has there been any thought in your states or around the country on maybe recruiting folks who are interested in cybersecurity and bringing them into elections? Kind of thinking about the future of the election cybersecurity workforce.
Well, I wanted to get onto this. I know I'm the moderator, but moderator privilege here. I get the distinct honor of being able to travel around this country and seeing a lot of institutions and seeing it with a lot of election officials. Last week, I was in the state of Florida and was speaking down at it was National Voter Registration Day on September 25th, and we went down to Pensacola State College, where they have a great cybersecurity program. It's a 2-year degree, and those folks come out of there ready to be hired, ready to be put into the workforce to help out with the threats that we're facing today. And I'm sure there's other schools around the country that are also doing it, but they put out, I think, at least 200 or 300 folks every 1 or 2 years or so. Or I might get those numbers wrong, but they have a great program down there as well. But moderator privilege passes it on.
Well, I think, one of the other challenges in hiring for election security is we work for state government, and it's hard to match the rates in the private sector. And so we were very successful in being able to grow our staff into those roles. We had staff members that maybe had some technical skills and knew a lot about elections, and we were able to combine those two things to continue to get them more education. For example, one of our staff members, we were able to get him through the process for becoming what they call, white hat hacker, an ethical hacker, so that we could do additional penetration testing on our statewide voter registration system. And so we really found that investing in our team, investing in our staff, growing the skills that you already have was a successful way to sort of fill those needs in what would otherwise be a very challenging market to recruit for.
when your home state is, Microsoft and Amazon, you talk about tough to compete with. It definitely is. We have had a pretty robust IT team in my office for many years and have worked with the Washington National Guard in coup planning and continuity of operations planning. So it dovetails nicely now that we're working with them on the cyber side. And what I can tell you is that we have this great resource because of Microsoft and Google and Amazon being having such a presence in Washington that a lot of our Guard members, that's their day job. And when they come and serve in the Guard, they bring those skills and they're helping us build this robust team. And I think that, Doug, you're absolutely right. The challenge is, do you teach election officials to be IT professionals or the other way around? And I think it's a mix of both. And that's why we're creating a CISO position and adding 5 IT specialists and we're hoping will bring that technology background to elections.
Our chief security officer for the county is our actually highest paid county employee. They officially surpassed the medical examiner, who is a medical doctor, as far as compensation. Despite that, they are the highest paid county employee. It is difficult to keep these folks when you're competing with the private sector. We're on our 2nd chief security officer. This one came to us from the banking industry. So we have found that bringing folks in from the private sector and then bringing them up to speed on elections has worked well for us. But recruitment and retaining these folks, I believe, will continue to be an issue going forward.
And we do have to have that intentionality about hiring those professionals that are dedicated for this purpose. But we also have to make sure that our team members that are already on board understand that it's incumbent on them to continue to invest in educational opportunities, to learn more about what they need to do to be responsible in this effort and how they can contribute in their jobs and be cross-trained to understand when to spot things and what to do in order to be a more effective team member overall. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. Before we go any further, I wanted to acknowledge Garrison from the Senate Rules Committee. Without Garrison's help, we would not be in here today. So, with all the so we don't have much in the federal government, but we do not taxpayer-funded coins that we pay for ourselves. So we wanted to give you one of these. And thank you so much for all the help that you gave us to get this room. Because as a Hill staff, I know how hard it is to get your boss to sign off on some stuff sometimes. With other things, but thank you for working with Brenda and the rest of the staff and getting us this room and the other room where the vendors are going to be able to show all their wares later on. So, take that as a token of our appreciation. Thank you very much. Yep. Thank you. So I've been told that we have about time for one more question. Who has the microphone? I guess they have it in the back there.
Hi, I'm Colleen Long from the Associated Press. I wondered if you guys could talk a little bit about the collaboration between the federal government and your states on election security. Has it improved? How is it better? How is it not better? What needs improvement? That sort of thing.
Again, with moderator privilege. The EAC is offering to states IT training for election officials, and it's offered free. Our testing and certification folks go down to state conferences and train folks either a 3-hour or 6-hour course, letting them know what sort of things they should be preparing for, some of the things that they should look out for as well. As we've come to the closeness of our 2018 election, I think that we have one training class left, but I think come January, we're going to be offering that up for other states as we move forward. I think that another piece of the partnership that's been working really well and that we've improved upon for 2018 as opposed to 2016 is the critical infrastructure piece of making sure that we get that information out to the states quickly and accurately so that they know what they should be looking out for with the Albert monitors and other pieces that have been implemented by our federal partners. And with that, I'll quiet down because it's not about me, it's about the people on the panel.
Commissioner, we want to continue to work with our public and private partners. I think it's important for everybody in this room and all the people within the sound of our voice to remember that with our private partners, if they are not committed to excellence in this area, they won't be private partners very long because they won't have a relationship with us and they won't be able to get business from other entities. But our public partners, especially Homeland Security, especially the National Guard, the EAC, all of the groups that you can think of that may be trying to help us and support us are welcome to work with our state. We have found them very, very accommodating, very interested in working with us and trying to help us be the best that we can possibly be. The one reluctance that we have in the state, this may be something that's being introduced to some of y'all for the first time, but in Alabama, we really don't like to be told what to do. And so whenever somebody appears as though they're trying to initiate what needs to happen and the way it needs to happen and why it needs to happen, that's not often received with open arms. And so whenever you intimate that you'd like to be a part of a team to help us be better than we currently are, or introduce new thought processes or ideas that we can receive and that we can implement so we can be better, we're for it. And we want to work with you, and that's what we found our public partners to be doing so far.
Well, I will be the first to admit that when the critical infrastructure designation came down and some of the initial contacts we were having with the federal government, I was skeptical. And I was probably one of the harshest critics of the idea of the federal government coming in and taking over our elections. I still am. But I can tell you that at the beginning it felt like an arranged marriage. That's not, I think that's probably the best description, particularly our partnership with Homeland Security. But what I can say is that the leadership at the top set the tone. Secretary Nielsen has done an outstanding job of really listening to election officials from across the country, from secretaries of state all the way down, and those partnerships are really positive now. I think we're in a very different place than we were even at the beginning of this year, at least speaking for my state. And we are getting access to resources that we couldn't have had a couple of years ago as a result. And so we had some things to work through, and I think most of them were communication channels, to be honest, that I'll give you an example. In my state, that the MSISAC would contact our OCIO and have meetings and talk a lot about my system and never call my staff or me, and that was problematic. And it was difficult to express because, of course, I would have to talk in terms of silos, which I don't like to. The governor's staff reports to the governor. My staff reports to me. I'm responsible for elections, and you got to stay in our lane. And now they get it, and I think those partnerships are really yielding a lot of really positive things.
Well, with that, I think that we are going to wrap this up, and I'm going to go to introduce the senator. I believe he's on his way in. Or should we do one more question, maybe? One more question. So I think Susan had a question. I saw her hand first. And no, these are not plants. This is me recognizing people. So wink, wink. So.
Thank you very much. Susan Greenhill, Policy Director for National Election Defense Coalition. And I want to commend everybody for the information that they're sharing. And it's really impressive how much the election community has stepped up to really improve election security in the last 2 years. And it's evident from all the information that was provided in this panel. I will get to my question. The one thing that I find that there is an absence of attention to is the question of internet voting, which is a concern for 32 states that use it in this country. It's a vulnerability to our system. And we don't see it being addressed. When France had concerns that their systems may be attacked by foreign adversaries, they canceled all internet voting. I want to commend Secretary Wyman for stepping up and taking action to issue an emergency rule in her state. There's only been one other state that's done it. So I'm wondering if there's going to be any attention put on that issue from the federal level. So that's to you, Chair Hicks.
From the federal level, the states run the elections. So, we are not getting into, I guess, internet voting for our own, as in dictating to the states on what they should be doing. I think that there are states out there that want to open up the allow for those who have access to their ballots in terms of if they're fighting in Afghanistan or Iraq, or even for countries that don't have good mail systems, to make sure that those folks still have access to the ballot. And so opening it up to various ways, I don't know what sort of things that the states are doing in terms of electronic return of ballots. But in terms of security, it would be to make sure that no matter what method that states are using to return the ballot, whether or not that's mail or being at the polls or electronically, to make sure that the safeguards are put in place to allow for those to be done securely and accurately. So with that, I think that we are going to wrap up this panel, and I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time. I know that it's a very busy season for you to break away and be here. And so I want to thank you all for being here, and I will step to the podium. Thank you, and go to the podium and start to introduce the senator.